I'm Kate.
I'm Sonya.
And I'm Beverly.
And today we're dishing with you from Hill Country Barbecue, located at 410 7th Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., part of that Penn Quarter yummy area of Washington.
This is a great place to come for barbecue. We've got it in front of us, but it's also a great place to come for live entertainment. And that entertainment is you and you, because they do live band karaoke on Wednesdays. I know, I've participated. Don't come on Wednesdays if you don't want me to sing.
I think it sounds like fun, but even more fun, the food here in front of us. We've got the cool as a cucumber salad.
Yeah.
And we have the PTL potato salad. Any guesses for what PTL means?
Praise the Lord!
Because you will be thanking Jesus after you eat it. It's so good. And then what do we have here? Chicken and brisket and pork ribs.
Can't go wrong with some pork ribs.
That's right, Hill Country Barbecue.
And our guest today is Dennis Pogue. He is the author of Founding Spirits. This is a great book that he also brought with libations from George Washington's actual distillery. Welcome, Dennis. Tell us about what you brought and what George Washington brought as a founding father to our palate.
Well, thanks. It's great
Our
to be here.
spiritual palate.
Great to be here, and it's a topic that everybody loves to talk about, so it's pretty easy. But who knew that George Washington, not only did he operate a distillery, but it was one of the largest whiskey distilleries in the country at the time. A lot of people sort of assume that Washington didn't drink, or they make up stuff about him not drinking, but in fact he was a social drinker and saw no problems with it whatsoever. He made a rye whiskey, which was the typical product at the time, and that's what we have in front of us.
Okay.
Washington would have not aged his whiskey, so the one on the left, the clear one, is the most like the whiskey that Washington made. It's a rye whiskey, not aged for any period of time, and of course you whiskey drinkers out there know that aging in barrels is what gives alcohol its dark flavor. So if it's not been aged in a barrel, it's going to be clear. And that's what this is. And Beverly, what's your question?
I was going to say, is this moonshine?
No.
No.
Our father of our country would not do anything illegal.
It wouldn't have been illegal at that time.
By definition, moonshine is illegal, meaning you haven't paid your taxes on it.
But that was probably well after Washington's time.
No, Washington paid taxes. He paid $334 in taxes in 1798.
So you had to pay taxes even on your whiskey or rye whiskey that you were making at your own place.
Absolutely.
And this is following the formula and the way that George Washington made his whiskey. We're all waiting for you to tell us it's okay to drink it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Should we toss it back? What are we supposed to do with this?
I would sip
Cheers.
it. I would sip it.
Sip it. Oh.
Well.
Wow. God bless America.
Woo! It's got a nice kick and a little bit of fire.
So you said you make it exactly the way that he made it. I know that he liked to make lists and he liked to write things down, but is that how you figured out how he made it? How do you know?
Well, actually, it's from another source. We do have tremendous amounts of information on the distillery. And what we did, though, we did not have a recipe. There's none that we found. But what we did was we calculated the percentages of the grain that was ground at the grist mill next door and that was sent over to the distillery to be ground. And so by doing that, you figure out the proportions. And it was 65% rye, 30% corn, and 5% malted barley. And that was a typical whiskey recipe of the time. So it worked out perfectly.
So what did he do with it? You said he was a social drinker. Did he have his friends over? Did he sell it? Did he just make it for fun?
No. He was a social drinker, but this was a big commercial venture for Washington. He hired a Scotsman by the name of James Anderson to be his plantation manager toward the end of his second term as president. And Anderson said, I can make you a lot of money by making you, whiskey. And I know all about how to do it. And Washington was initially a little skeptical, admitted that he didn't know anything about it, asked around, and he was assured by other folks that if it was a good product, there's no doubt that it would sell. And so it's really a commercial venture. In the first year, they started small with 2 stills in an existing building. They made several hundred gallons of whiskey. It sold immediately. And so by the next year, Washington agreed to Anderson's plan to build a new distillery with 3 more stills. And it turns out that it's was one of the largest whiskey distilleries in the country at the time. By 1799, he was making almost 11,000 gallons of rye whiskey and selling it through various markets.
Was this his biggest crop, if you will, on Mount Vernon?
Well, Mount Vernon's a huge farm. There's over 3,000 acres under cultivation. They're growing all sorts of grains. And so one of Anderson's argument was that you're already growing the grain to do this, But
Might as well have some fun with it.
But you make more money by turning it into whiskey and selling it than you do just by selling it as either grain or flour.
So it was a big money-making venture for Washington. Does it remain a money-making venture for Mount Vernon today?
Well, it does. We started this project about 12 years ago. People had known for years that Washington had a distillery, but we had the opportunity to acquire the site and to excavate it. So we sent our archaeologists out there, and they worked for 5 years, and they uncovered the entire footprint of the building. It's huge, 75 feet by 33 feet. We found the evidence of where the stills were located, all kinds of other information. So we were real excited about bringing this back as a way to talk about an aspect of Washington's career that most people didn't know about, and that we thought would be inherently interesting. We were able to get some support. The Distilled Spirits Council of the U.S., they decided it was a great project for them to support financially. And so we wound up reconstructing the distillery on the footprint, just as we think it was, and it's been open since 2007 as an educational opportunity.
I like these kinds of educational opportunities. These are my
We all do.
How can we educate ourselves by, where do we find this? Do we have to go to Mount Vernon to buy a bottle, or can you buy a bottle of this?
Well, you can. And to answer Kate's question, no, we always thought this would be an educational program. We never thought that we would, get into the commercial whiskey business. There's all sorts of good folks in Kentucky, where you're from, that make all sorts of great product. But people are so interested in it. And that was about the second question that I was asked about this project was, when are you going to make it, and can I have some?
Well, tell us about this other one. So this was not done in Washington's day because this one has been aged.
Exactly. Now, they knew about aging, and they knew that aging changed the flavor, but whiskey is cheap, and it was highly alcoholic, and that's what people were interested in.
And fast.
So we've been
Some
making...
things never change.
So we've been making the whiskey that Washington made, and people have been trying that. But then we also found out that folks were real interested in what would it taste like if it was aged. And so this has been in a barrel for 4 years. It's exactly the same grain. It was made exactly the same way in Washington's distillery, but it's been in a barrel for 4 years. So why don't you taste it and tell me what you think about it.
Okay.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I like how you go all the way back. I'm going to do that same technique. Since you're the expert, I'm going to do that.
Well, I'm assuming that people can do these
Long
types
and smooth.
of taste
smooth.
comparisons at Mount Vernon, and I'm assuming that you do some kind of distillery events. But I also want to know, how did you come to be working there? How did you become the distiller at Mount Vernon?
Well, that's a good question. I'm an archaeologist by training, and I came there 25 years ago to run their archaeology program, and did that for a number of years, and then they put me in charge of maintaining all the historic buildings, and so I get to be involved in projects like this. And no, my mom had no idea that she sent me to graduate school. She thought I was going to be an anthropologist. It turns out, I'm making...
As if Indiana Jones gets to have all the fun. You've really tapped into that fun side of archaeology.
It's very fun.
Now,
and we do make it available, but we still only make small quantities of this because it really is an educational opportunity, and so most of the time we're not really making whiskey, but we do it a couple of times a year when in the off season, and that allows us to produce enough to offer it. And the next batch of the unaged rye is going to be available April 14th, and sold only at Mount Vernon.
Only at Mount Vernon.
Well, that's right.
That's
If you
good
want to
know.
know more about the beginnings of American whiskey, you can do several things. You can read Dennis's book, or you can travel to Mount Vernon, and it sounds like taste it for yourself. Thanks so much for being with us. And as always, thank you for being with us. You can check us out on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter, and be sure to tell us who you think we should be dishing with. We'll see you next time.